Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Theological Leftovers. I am excited to be able to share something with you today that reminded me of exactly why I wanted to do this series, because there are always things that come up and I never have a good opportunity to share them. And the perfect example was this past Sunday. We had just finished a Bible class that talked about things about fear. And we talked about especially those things that we shouldn't bother to be afraid of, that we often are. And one of those things was weakness. We talked about it in Bible class, but then right after Bible class, we came to worship. Most of the people in worship weren't in the Bible class. And so it didn't provide me with a great opportunity when we sang hymn 683, a great Paul Gerhardt hymn called Jesus, Thy Boundless Love to Me, and this issue of weakness came up. And it was the perfect example of why we don't have to be afraid of our weaknesses. But I didn't have a good opportunity to share it. It wouldn't have made sense in the context of what I was preaching on. It wouldn't have made sense to most of the folks that weren't there in Bible class. So I mentioned it to the people who were in Bible class real quickly before the sermon, and then we just moved on. Well, I want to address it today very quickly, but I want to address it because this is such a wonderful thing for us to be considering. And Paul Gerhardt, no surprise, especially when it comes to fears and weaknesses, he does a great job of helping us to understand these things better. But before I share that little quote from him and some scripture with you, I want to ask you a question. And the question is this: have you ever been in the presence of someone who was weak? Or have you yourself been in that situation where you were weak? I mean, to the point of maybe even being helpless. You needed care, or you were providing care for this person who was so weak. Maybe it was a little infant, a tiny little baby who really can't do anything for himself or for herself. Maybe it was in the presence of someone who was ill and needed care. Maybe it was a loved one on their deathbed when they only had just a little bit of strength left. But have you ever been in the presence of someone who was weak? If so, what did you notice? I know that sounds kind of like a weird question, doesn't it? But what did you notice? What did that weakness highlight so that you couldn't help but see it? Didn't their weakness highlight the care that they were receiving, whether it was good or bad? You see what I'm getting at? The weakness of the individual who wasn't able to care for themselves really cast a bright light on those people who were providing care. You may have noticed that their care wasn't very good. You may have watched people go by them and treat them like they were forgotten or of very little value. You may have noticed them being, at least in your opinion, mistreated, but their weakness highlighted the care that they were receiving, didn't it? In the same way, if they were getting very good care, you noticed it. Their weakness highlighted that. If they were being respected when they didn't feel like they were worth anything, how beautiful is that to see? When they're down, when they feel absolutely worthless because of whatever it is that's making them weak, when somebody comes into their presence and shows that they have value, respects them, isn't that a beautiful thing? Doesn't their weakness highlight that beautiful thing? It highlights the love that whoever is providing care has for this person who isn't able to care for themselves. So whether it's good or bad, the weakness of the individual highlights the care that they are receiving from outside. Does that make sense? Well, keep that in mind as I share with you just the first part of stanza 4 of hymn 683. Again, this is a Paul Gerhardt hymn who understood suffering and affliction and weakness better than I hope than I ever will. He said in his hymn, Jesus, Thy Boundless Love to Me, in stanza 4, this is a prayer, in suffering be Thy love my peace, and in weakness be Thy love my power. How can there be power in me when I am weak? How can I do anything powerful when I can't do anything for myself? Well, this is exactly why I asked you the questions I did and why I shared with you the example that I did. This is exactly what Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 through 10. He's talking about his affliction and his suffering and how he wished it would be removed. In fact, more than that, he prayed that it would be removed 3 times. But God said to him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses," Paul says, "so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with my weaknesses." Doesn't love them, right? But he is content with his weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. Because Paul says, "For when I am weak, then I am strong." Perhaps you've read that passage before, or heard it preached before, or taught to you before, and maybe you were confounded with that last sentence, just like with Paul Gerhardt's hymn. Because both Pauls say the same thing. Paul Gerhardt says, "In weakness be thy love my power." And Paul, the apostle, says, "For when I am weak, then I am strong." How is this? How can this be? Think back to the example that I shared with you at the beginning of this video. Spend some time considering it. When I am weak, those who provide care from outside of me, because I can't provide care for myself, those who provide care, their good care or their bad care is highlighted by my weakness. And that means when I am weak, people have the opportunity not just to see what a wonderful nurse I have, or what a wonderful doctor I have, what a wonderful wife I have, but they have an opportunity to see in my weakness what a wonderful God I have, who cares for me and who provides for me, who may see me through this weakness and restore my strength in this world. But because Jesus is risen from the dead, I and you and all who are watching can be assured, even if it's me on my deathbed in my weakest moment, when my strength will never come back, you can be assured that God cares for me, and his care is beautiful and perfect and loving, because just as Jesus is risen from the dead, I will rise as a child of God. In my baptism, I was adopted. I was made God's child. He will not forsake me. He will see me through this moment of weakness. He will restore my strength, and he will make me eternal when he gives me his kingdom. The care of my Father in heaven, of your Father in heaven, of our Father in heaven is perfect. Weakness and strength. The weak witness is a strong witness. Something for you to consider in today's theological leftover. God bless you. God bless your week. I hope that I have the opportunity to see you on Sunday in Bible class. We're starting this week promptly at 9 o'clock. Looking forward to seeing you there. God bless.